Welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Ankur Patel, and today I have Sachin Vaidya on the show. He's a chief information officer for a very large financial institution in California. Sachin, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ankur. Thanks for having me on the show.
Well, for the sake of our audience, what do you do today? More specifically, how did you get into the particular role that you're in currently?
Sure. I was fortunate enough after graduation to work for a financial institutions, and throughout my 25 years of career being in this, financial institutions became my niche. So I started with the various roles of a IT manager, worked as a chief technology officer, CIO, CISO, as well as a CIO position. So when I joined my current employment, I joined as a CISO, but then there was an opportunity to come as a CIO, which I've taken over for about almost a year and a half now. So it's just been a fantastic journey in financial institutions, just leading them and managing all the intricacies of IT management within the financial institutions.
When it comes to the latest technology, in this case,
Mhm.
generative AI, where do you think institutions like the ones that you've worked at are in that journey? Have they gone head in and started to adopt this, or are they taking a more cautious approach today?
Yeah, typically, for most of the financial institutions, they typically take a caution approach. Obviously, just like a financial industry or a healthcare industry, insurance industry, we're heavily regulated, right? So every time a new opportunity comes or new technology comes, the approach to that is very slow, or in a sense that evaluating out all the threat vectors and compliance is the biggest thing. So make sure that everything that is being implemented is implemented correctly, and it's a well thought out approach rather than just adopting the new shining objects.
Who's leading that charge today? I'm always very curious to see who's accelerating and has their foot on the pedal versus who's pressing the brake at the same time to make sure things don't go too quickly.
Yeah, so great question. I think as a technologist individual, the CIOs and CTOs are taking the charge of that journey. But at the same time, they're working very closely with compliance, and they don't want to put the brakes on that, but they just want to make sure that whatever you do it with a very well thought out approach, and you approach it with the methodically, as well as reducing the risk of this new journey that you're embarking on. So it's a very good combination. It's a group effort, but it's a collaboration between the compliance and the technology as the new things would come about.
Within a bank, there are, I'm sure, very many use cases to potentially go and tackle with some of this technology. How does
Mhm.
that strategy to identify which use cases make sense to tackle now, which use cases might be good candidates but are maybe worth tackling in the future? How does that playbook get developed over time in an institution like yours?
Yeah, so it's like anything else. It starts with strategic planning. What I like to call is small wins in a quickest amount of time, and you may want to use the word low hanging fruits. Where can you make a biggest impact by providing those type of avenues, or tackling those type of activities? So, in my mind, it's low hanging fruits, something that you can try out very quickly, because again, in trying new technologies, you want to fast fail, right? You don't want to go into something where it just prolongs, and at the end you realize, okay, that wasn't the case. So you want to try something out on a very, like I said, low hanging fruit, something that you can get to your bank on the quickest amount of time. And that also builds rapport with the groups and with your business units, right? Because if you can showcase them that you can do this, you can achieve this in a shorter amount of time, it gets a great buy-in from all around. Yeah.
For that experimentation, which I
Yeah.
completely agree with, it has to happen. You need to get good learnings, develop scar tissue, make sure
Yeah.
that if you do fail, you fail fast and it doesn't have any real business impact. And then,
Mhm.
of course, if things are successful, you want to see that through to the light of day. How does that experimentation happen in a way where you can get access to the models and data and the right business owners and the IT teams to come together to work on this in a way where you can quickly iterate through the different experiments to figure out which ones to move forward with versus which ones to go in and cut the cord with?
Yeah, again, it's a collaboration, it's a communication, making sure that you're allowing all the folks that are part of this journey upfront. When you are discovering this or discovering an opportunity, you work with them, you identify pain points to say, hey, what's really causing them with an issue that you're trying to solve and achieve, or want to achieve it on a faster pace. It's a collaboration. It's that's what it really comes down to. It's a teamwork, collaborations where I, as an IT leader, providing technology and providing resources in terms of to address that, but really you're validating that against the folks who are using it, and then they're in the grind, so to speak, on a day-to-day basis. So you really want to collaborate with those, and you exchange ideas, and things come on the fly, and you have to have that open communication or the channel to allow to foster those type of discussions within your environment. So that those are some of the ways that you can achieve it fairly quickly.
Appreciate that, Sachin. And then when we talk about which departments and which workloads from the business side to consider, which ones are the ones that come top of mind as these are the ones where it makes sense to go and attempt to introduce this technology for first before we get to the rest of the organization? Are there a couple of use
Yeah.
cases that stand out among the rest?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you can start with the IT organization first because that's your test bed. You can test it without going out anywhere, right? So that's the first one. So process automation and process improvement, I think those are the two areas that you can really use this technology or try out new things. Customer service is the other one too. So like let's say for example our help desk ticketing system, something that you want to do it, you want to have a chatbot or something like that that provides answers on a normal based regular questions that are being asked for, you can do that. So IT and call centers are the two primary ones that you can test it out pretty quickly. The other one that I would say that makes the biggest bang for the buck is the lending process, a lending environment, because that's really your bread and butter for all financial institutions, right? Lending is a key. And where you can use this technology is when you can shorten the length of the time when an application comes in by the time the funding occurs.
Yeah.
If you can reduce that number of days, well, guess what? Your revenue starts to come in early, your fee income starts to come in early, and you can start really showcasing that. So let's say on a typical financial institutions, if it took, let's say, anywhere from 60 to 90 days from a onboarding to funding, but with the new process, new
Mhm.
automation, new underwriting, where you can automate all those things, and let's say you reduce that down by 50%. So instead of 90 days, you reduce it down to 45 days. Guess what? Your fee income starts coming in 45 days early, and that's the biggest value that you can show and provide to the organization when you start doing that.
Would love to touch on both of those because I think those
Yeah,
are incredible use cases to work on. Maybe let's
cool.
start with the second one, which is lending, right? And I think we touch a lot of lending workflows as well. And one of the things that's surprising
Mhm.
initially is that working on automation for lending operations is not just a cost reduction play. I mean, in some cases, like you don't even think about that as a cost reduction
Right,
lens because you're not looking to go and replace any of the talented loan officers that you have. They're very valuable to organization. You actually want more of them, if not, it's not that you want less of them, right? So it's not
right,
about like personnel displacement or anything like that, but it's about enabling those individuals to move more quickly so you could shorten the turnaround time for these decisions and you could touch more applications, right? So you start seeing more lending activity that you'd like to have. It has a
right.
revenue impact. And that's the thing that I think a lot of people have initially maybe had a incorrect lens on, which I think you address appropriately, which is by shortening the turnaround times, you're actually going to have a revenue impact for the organization because they can go from 60 to 90 days down to maybe as little as 30 to 45 days once the process has been improved. And I think that's low hanging fruit. It's valuable to every major lending institution, and it's some of the huge gains that we're seeing with generative AI. So that I think is a really great one to call out. I think digging into that a bit more, when you think about introducing this technology to lending and to loan officers and underwriters, what are some of the challenges to getting this through the door?
Yeah, it's time, time and effort because they're inundated with their day to day stuff, right? Day to day items that they work on. So penetrating into that, having that their availability to understand the technology and understand the tryout, is the biggest challenge. So, for example, let's say there was a process of auto spread that you're trying to work with, right? That requires some sort of a tune or tweak because those are experts. They work, underwriters work on that on a day-to-day basis. So in order for you to validate any sort of a model or even trying it out or setting up the model in the first place requires some sort of a collaboration with them. Finding that time and the collaboration becomes a challenge because they just don't have that. They continue to spin in the vortex, I like to call, that they continue to spin on the day-to-day stuff and they never come out of it. Where if we work together, we can show that it adds value to you by by putting some efforts in the beginning. That you're gaining a lot more advantage, you're gaining a lot more efficiency over time. Showcasing that is the hardest part. Having that buy-in is the hardest part. But once you start expressing that, once you start communicating that to them, they realize it. Once you start showing them what you're trying to achieve, what's the final result, right? Because on all of this, final result, final outcome must be there in the beginning. So that's a vision that you're working with. What are you trying to achieve at the end? What's your vision look like? And then you work backwards and start sharing those ideas, start sharing those vision with the team members. Helps you facilitate that and helps their buy-in. But it is a challenge initially, definitely.
Yeah, man, I definitely get that these individuals are busy. They have a lot of existing work to do. The last thing that they want to spend time on is trying to understand a new technology and figure out how to make it work.
Right.
Because even if it could add more value to them, you have to overcome that initial resistance, right? Just because they're
Right.
time strapped and attention strapped. And
That's
our
right.
philosophy is one where we want to make it as seamless of an adoption as possible, where it makes their existing workflow more efficient. They start seeing the windfall of it, almost like behind the scenes. Like all of a
Yeah.
sudden, like the workloads are easier because they see more data pre-populated, pre-tagged, pre-extracted, so they could start seeing some quick wins. Because if they
Mhm.
see those wins, they're more likely to go and lean in and invest time with the technology. And I think, for example, Apple does a beautiful job of this, right? Like they
Mhm.
introduce intelligence in their different applications slowly over time. It's very
Right.
much like naturally blended in. And I think we'll
Right.
see that with Apple Intelligence in more iPhones with all the
Correct.
updates are to come. But it doesn't feel like it's not trying to add more friction. It just natively built into the applications and the workflows that we would, for example, do on the iPhone. I think that design principle is really important when you think about getting great adoption among these users within their workflows, right? So I think that's a very critical point that you just mentioned there.
Yeah, absolutely. And in R&D becomes the key, right? Because then you can have all those test beds, everything that you can try it out. So having an R&D department and doing that, Apple as big as they are, I'm sure they have thousands of people to do that. But when you are a bank or a financial institutions where you're already resource limited, it's tough to find that time. But again, with technology and with showcasing few small steps and showing the vision too. What's your end vision looks like helps rolling out those
Yeah.
ideas in. Yeah.
Let's talk about the other use case that you mentioned earlier, which is chatbots introducing conversational interfaces to empower like customer support and the like. And I think when a lot of people think about this, they think of like ChatGPT being
Yeah.
available or ChatGPT like experience being available to these individuals, maybe when they're on calls or they get tickets submitted, like support tickets and such. But in your view, which versions of these applications are you starting to see in business to help some of these customer support reps do their work better?
Yeah, I think if I can summarize it in few words, it would be like enhanced customer experience. how can you enhance their experience of doing this, right? At the same time, creating efficiency and doing that. So creating a chatbot type of a environment, and we see that in many industries nowadays, right? When you are going on any website, the chatbot opens up, and all that is it's a RPA AI built into it, saying to address your basic that first level of questions, right? So very similarly, it provides an answer to the person who's probably looking for a short answer very quickly. We have become accustomed to a fast-paced environment where we want things rapidly today, right? We want that instant gratification. So having a technology like that within the client support team or that having that chatbot provides you with that instant gratification to the person who's inquiring. At the same time, it frees up your resources, right? Like let's say I want to set up, I won't put a percentage on this, but a common one is like, I'm locked out of my account. Can you reset it? Well, there is a self password reset technology that's available that you can reset it, right? That's a perfect example of creating efficiency and not waiting for someone to actually log in, reset your password, and then giving you an answer saying, okay, now you're gone. Up until that time, the person just probably just wiggles their toes and fingers to say, okay, I can't do anything until my password has been reset. But if you have that technology available right away, it takes seconds for them to do that. So again, creating efficiencies, creating a faster outcome to the questions that they might have. And so the client support, the chat feature allows you to do that. It allows you to have that capabilities. At the same time, it also allows you to streamline few things. You can start using that and start training those models to provide those quick answers, and you can start feeding those in. So those are the biggest win. With the technology, and it doesn't even require any effort. You have to continue to train them and feed that information in, but the amount of effort that is required and the number of tickets or number of volume of the calls that it gets reduced, it's a huge win there.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think the potential value is quite massive. And I think when done well, it adds this magical experience where all of a sudden you don't have to wait for a human operator to come online to give you the correct answer. You're able to ask a question and you have really grounded suggestions and support resources that you're able to access, right? But how do you design an experience that is going to do a great job of addressing the end user's query? So, like, they have a question, it addresses it adequately. Because the thing I worry about is that a poor implementation of this could actually lose confidence and trust with the end user where they are just frustrated. They're not getting the right answer back. They're like, wow, is this AI? It's like, it's pretty terrible. And
Right.
it causes a hit to the brand value of the organization. When done well, I think it's a huge opportunity, but I think
Sure.
equally, I think it's a risk in the sense that if you do a poor implementation, you get this wrong, you're
Yeah.
actually pissing people off, and then
Yeah.
your NPS scores suffer.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like with anything else. You need to do your homework right, right? If you do your homework right, you prep for your exams, then you're gonna do well in the exams. This is very similar to that. And data is very valuable. So what you are fitting in, we've heard about garbage in, garbage out type of a concept. What you are fitting in is so important. Somebody validating that data, the accuracy of that data, the accuracy of the answers, forecasting questions. What type of questions will the user might be asking for, right? Or a customer might be looking for. What's a common questions that are being addressed? So you have to do your homework to address or understand all of those questions, all of those queries, and then build your model based on the experiences that they had in the past. So here, using history as your guiding principle, what history has been there, what type of questions have they come in, understanding that, and then putting that into a model and coming up with an answer, and then validating it. Before you roll anything out, the UAX, you have to have user acceptance performed on that and validate that. And that's where your subject matter experts come into play, right? Those who have worked with this on a day-to-day basis can say, oh, no, this is incorrect, or oh, this is perfect answer, or this can be enhanced by doing this. So again, collaborations, using the advantage, taking the advantage of the skill sets of the people that are there and building it and building it right. That's why I would say those who jump in and want to go for that bling and introduce the technology right away without thinking all of this, sometimes they fail and they fall flat on their face, right? Versus
Yeah.
those who have done it thought put some thought behind it and have that done, the adoption rate and the enhancement of their customer service increases tremendously.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that you want to be intentional and you want to plan well. So you have the different phases of testing that you do before it's released into a more production setting. I do think, though, that the opposite is also important, or important to consider, which is if you're too cautious and you're too gun shy and you're letting your fear of hallucinations or poor experiences prevent you from actually getting on this path and doing the experiments in some small scale sort of way, that's
Right.
also going to hurt you long term. Because yes, you're not taking any risk,
Right.
you're not getting any bad experience for your end users, but you're also
Mhm.
not experimenting and learning how this technology works, how to make it work. And so you're missing valuable cycles while your peers may be doing that. And that's
Right.
equally bad because I think that 2 years from now, you'll realize you're so far behind in terms of
Right.
experimenting and adopting and getting this while your peers have adopted it. It's going to be
Right.
night and day, right? And I
Right.
think of it very much like, I was obviously alive during the internet, but I was
Mhm.
too young to maybe have seen all of that professionally. But
Right.
I was close enough to it, like in the years after, to know that the ones that really misjudged the
Mhm.
impact that the advent of the internet was having and about to have, they misjudged so much that those some of those companies just don't even exist. Like they're written off from memory from individuals just because they just don't exist because they missed that inflection. And I do think that with AI, you may have equally big winners and losers, right? So I think
Mhm.
getting this inflection point right is important. You don't want to move too quickly, but you also don't want to move too slowly at this juncture.
Absolutely, and you also have to worry about your competitors. You know what your competitors are doing in financial institutions. We've heard many fintechs are coming. You know, you brought in Apple. Apple has their own, own bank, own credit card
Yeah.
systems, and all that. They're going in there, so they are going after those financial institutions. So yes, and again, I think it's a balancing act, right? What's important to you today? It's a journey that you want to take place for your future tomorrow. At the same time, you have to evaluate your customers. I always use this mentality that anything that you provide in terms of technology or product or service, it has to be customer centric because that's what we are catering to. And if their needs are you're not able to meet their needs, then they're gonna go elsewhere. So it's the same analogy that. But I also agree with the fact that you can't be left too behind. You need to have that balance, and you need to get on that journey not early enough, but also not later enough. It's somewhere
Yeah.
you have to find your own medium. And for every institution is different, right? That journey is different. You can't compare one item that worked for one institution will work for the other one. May not work because everyone is different from that perspective. But I agree. It's like when the internet came out, everyone who were on that board, they survived. Kodak is a perfect example of a
Yeah.
company, right? We all know what happened to them. When all this digital phone system that came in, it just literally took them out of business. So either you evolve to do that, and also forecast the future and see what your challenges are. And so we have some pulse on the fintech side of the world as well that we have to keep a tag of because otherwise, you're going to lose that out in lending. There's so
Yeah.
many. We realize you're a business bank, but for those banks who are retail banks, they have to worry about all these fintechs and worry about what type of products and services that they are delivering at a faster pace compared to where they are. So it's important to have that balance.
In navigating this inflection point, how are you or organizations that you've been involved with thinking about adequately resourcing? So resourcing in the sense of having the capital, so the budget to go and spend,
Yeah.
um, hiring more internally, for example, to go and meet some of the needs, working with external vendors or consulting firms or hyperscalers. How does
Right.
that budgeting, resourcing, and planning exercise work today?
Uh, yeah, I mean, it's a keen part of it. But you can't have a budget if you can't have your house in order first, right? So if your house is not in order first, you can't even try to do some things like that. So that's the most important thing. But at the same time, once you have that, once you have your operations running and your resources are allocated properly, again, it's having a strategy, having that mindset of where we want to go, having that constant conversation with the leadership, right, and the board of directors as well, to say, hey, where do we see this? Where do we see the bank going, and what would we like to do? So it all becomes a strategic exercise, and talking at that level, that drives some inception that comes in, that drives the budget, that drives the resources, and again scaling it and evaluating the opportunities where you want to focus most of your dollar amount and efforts that are going in there. The one thing that within the financial institutions that everyone worries about is security, right? It's the
Yeah.
biggest
Mhm.
challenge that is out there in the environment out there. So you have to weigh out your all your options and weigh out your strategy to address that. So I think it starts there. And also, depending on what the strategic direction is, that's where the allocations of funding also goes into place to say, okay, we want to try something, we're going to spend X number of dollars to do this, or we're going to wait until that have that done. So
When you think about experimenting, where does that initial experimentation happen? Is it using engineers, working off with your hyperscaler of choice, using the foundation models that they have available on the platform, and then just starting there? Or do you, work with, for example, consulting firms or
right.
external vendors to evaluate who you should use to build off of as part of that journey?
Yeah, it's a combination. I think we rely heavily on the providers, the financial, the banking technology that is provided, the banking platform that the bank
Hmm.
operates on. We rely on them because many times what happens is you have to have integrations with that technology
Yeah.
providers to do that, right? So having the ability to do that. So starting there is a starting point. So we would start there, and then if you need a partner who can come in and accelerate your testing or that environment, that's where you would engage in the outside consultants or outside companies who does this or provides this type of a services.
And then in terms of thinking through the security aspects, right? I think you mentioned that a few times. I agree, it's very top of mind.
Yeah,
And I think you're going to see paradigm shifts. I mean, we saw this big explosion of SaaS,
yeah.
and obviously became the mainstay of how software was built and delivered. But I'm
Hmm.
curious on the security side, what are some of the trends that you're seeing, particularly with generative AI and the use of LLMs? How are you thinking about, or how are peers of yours thinking about the use of these LLMs on some of the core data that you have?
Oh yeah, no, it's absolutely important. That security is utmost important to any financial institutions, and protecting customer data is the key. Where we've seen this generative AI, and you've seen many cases of deep fakes that are out there. They're using the AI to either penetrate in or continue to provide more attacks, more phishing campaigns that are out there. But the key to me is continuing education, educating your staff members, educating your employees is such a key on this, and then also making them aware of things that are out there. So that instant communications between them, sharing the information to say, hey, stay away from this or don't click on this link. So it's constant cat and a mouse game, right? Where you want to be ahead of the adversaries, but at the same time, adversaries has much more power, much more technology that they used and to attack you. So it's a balancing act, and it is challenging to some degree. When if somebody asks, how secure are you? No one's gonna, no CTO or a CIO or a CISO will say, okay, we're 100% secure, right? Because they
Sure.
just don't want
Yeah.
to put that price tag on it. So it becomes so important, but at the same time, you do want to invest in the technology. It's investment in programs that can help you protect with that. So again, it's a balancing act.
What about your preference to use closed source models or open source models? And if you do use closed source, the particular implementation like Azure OpenAI versus using OpenAI directly, how do you
Mhm.
think about making some of those choices?
Absolutely. So again, I'll go back to compliance and being in financial institutions, we have to comply. So I don't want any data to be outside. So there is no question about it that I won't use any public OpenAI. Period.
Yeah.
It has
Hmm.
to be containerized. It has to be secured. It has to be within our data. To answer your question, Azure AI versus OpenAI, my choice would definitely be Azure AI. That we can containerize it, make it available only to your environment, and that data does not get shared outside. And I think that's also important because as you are building those models, as you are building those availability of that technology to do a lot more things, is training on your data. So it's going to provide that accurate information versus if you're on the public space, it's gathering some information from the public knowledge and trying to infuse that in. So I think you won't have that accuracy that you would get with having a private a private OpenAI or Azure AI in your or the models in your environment that can provide you with a lot more accuracy and robust outcomes on that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think turning to maybe away from generative AI and speaking to maybe like just more traditional machine learning, traditional AI, how much of that is still a focal area for organizations like yours? Because obviously there was a lot of great things happening around fraud detection and
Yes.
different predictive models. And unfortunately, it feels like not a lot of people talk about that as much anymore because of all the Gen AI hype, rightly or wrongly, right? I think the focus has been on Gen AI versus everything else. But could we talk a little bit more about what's happening with traditional ML and the adoption of those models within organizations like yours?
Yeah, no, definitely. So I think you touched upon there was a hype about real-time fraud detections and fraud protections and that, right? And many times what happens is institutions have outsourced those type of monitoring to the provider, and so they rely very much on the provider to provide those type of information to deal with rather than building something in-house, right? So that's where it comes in. But yeah, again, all those systems can detect those unusual patterns or activity within the transaction, identifying it. That the speed of identification becomes also a key in that. So how quickly can you identify that becomes so much important on it. But again, for many institutions, they do rely on their providers to provide that versus building it in-house and doing so. And you talked about RPA processes. It's just again AI. The one word that I use is RPA on steroids, right? That's how I would classify it, AI for the most part. When it comes to those predictive analysis, those sentimental analysis
Hmm.
of that data, and then analytics that comes into play.
Speaking of RPA, robotics process automation, how much of that has gotten adopted, and how much, what I'd say is like ROI have you seen from that? Because that also used to be the probably the primary windfall from automation, right? Automation and
Mm-hmm.
RPA were not synonymous, but close to synonymous for a number
Yeah.
of years. So I'm curious, like how that phase has gone for organizations like yours.
Yeah, I would say it has gone pretty well. And if I were to put a percentages on, it would be close to 70 to 75% of those RPA processes are delivering values and in creating those efficiencies. So the adoption rate for those type of items have increased. It provides a tremendous amount of value to the organization. When it comes to like API processes or upload to the databases and uploading of information,
Yep.
doing the basic stuff over and over, those type of processes is pretty much how they're operating at the highest efficiency of like 100% without having errors that are part of it. So in my mind, that adoption of the RPA process within many institutions have gone well, and then their adoption rate and the accuracy of it is much higher compared to any other things that are out there.
Yeah, it feels like this is a incredible time that we live in where you have many tools to go and deliver real business value. And I think it's just expanded, right? So RPA
Hmm.
being one type of automation, you have LLMs, you have generative ways to do process automation as well. You have classical or traditional ML, which is more predictive in nature to handle fraud detection. And a lot of it comes down to having your house in order, having really good data, having good data pipelines, having good ways to do experimentation, test it, and then slowly
Hmm.
get this into production so that there is a high likelihood that the
Yeah.
people that this could benefit actually adopt the technology, right? And then learning about that adoption curve and how to kind of go in and add more value over time. It feels like there's a lot to choose from, which is
Hmm.
both, I guess, fun, but then also daunting, I imagine, when you think about building a playbook for the next 3, 4, 5 years.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And the key aspect of this is having a right partner who understands your business, who understands your outcome, who understands what you were trying to achieve. So yeah, when you are embarking on this journey, having the right partner is so important on this. As well as they need to understand what you're trying to achieve. So again, what's the final outcome you're trying to achieve from all of this that you're trying to work with, not just because it's a newer technology or I just want to adapt something. It's to me, it either falls on there are a few criterias. Does it enhance customer experience? One, two, does it create efficiency? Three, does it provide an accurate and processes things on a faster way of doing
Mhm.
things, and does it make their life of a user easier? Those are the few areas that it has to fall in those buckets, and if it does that, then you're achieving something and you're providing a positive outcome versus just trying it and you're doing it just for the heck of having that technology available to you. Yeah.
If we look at some of the maybe the patterns or trends among banks that are in the mid market today, do you have a sense of whether we will start to see some more consolidation where maybe some of the banks, some of the institutions here have adopted technology. They have a more of a platform approach to getting efficiency in credit decisions and customer experiences and fraud detection, where there's just so much more tech enablement and they operate a
Hmm.
better business, they have better business foundations, that they start then acquiring what I'd say is like the less competitive, less efficient organizations that might be in the same business, but are frankly just don't have that same technical investment and
Yeah.
platform to go and do that quality of work at the same margins and such. Because it feels like there's going to be big winners and big losers, and I just am concerned with the fact that like the ones that don't adopt,
Hmm.
they start then to become more acquisition targets, right? And you may
Yeah.
see more consolidation over the years. I'm curious if you've thought through like what that could look like if this naturally plays out the way it seems to be right now.
Yeah, I think the AI and the use of AI and the evolving of a technology aspect is one part of the overall M&A activities, right? It's not just because they haven't done this, they're gonna be a target of acquisition. It's also operations, how well they're doing. The margins are the biggest thing. It's the outside environment. How's the environment is impacting. We're talking about election year that is coming, as well as some of the things that are in the market to be forecasted for next year. Those elements also play in that decision. So it's not just a technology that okay. Let's say, for example, my bank didn't adopt to a newer technology. Now it automatically becomes a target of an acquisition. No, that is not the case, and it's also a fit. However, yes, if you don't evolve, if you don't change with time, if you don't provide what your customers are really looking for, that's the time when people starts to get worried about to say, okay, I might be, I just can't. And the other thing is I can't just grow by what I have here. I can grow this by acquisition, or that organic growth that used to be there is just not there
Mm.
anymore. So those are some of the elements that come into play when people are thinking about changing it or turning into a acquire or become a acquisition. Those are some of the elements of it. But yes, keeping a pace with the current technology and services is a key, and how robust you have your foundational layout, well, then you can sustain those hits and sustain the environment, and so that becomes very important piece of it.
What about the fact that there are a lot of, let's say, software that's been in banking for a long time, right? They might
Hmm.
not even be cloud. It might be applications that are run locally.
Hmm.
How does an institution or institutions like the ones that you've worked at how do they incorporate the latest like generative AI and so some of those technologies with some of the let's say the applications that are core to the business,
Yeah.
but that are maybe harder to integrate with, right? Because it feels like the old and the new technology need to somehow work together for
Yeah.
there to be a really great operational process that goes seamlessly from one to the next. And then I guess maybe a quick follow up question to that is like, is is the right choice to stay with the existing like legacy software that you have, or
Mhm.
is there a possibility to adopt net new software entirely, which of course is a little bit more risky because you have to gut and replace or rip and replace some existing tech stacks. So I'm just curious sort of how that happens with an organization like yours.
Yeah, no, definitely. And that drives to your whoever your core providers are, because that's what they're doing on a day-to-day basis, what their roadmap looks like, what are they looking for in the future, how are they adopting these new technologies and being that. So having a constant pulse on that area helps you identify that. But those are, there are some legacy software that are there that just not evolving, and what do you do with that? It that's when the hard decisions comes into play, saying that, hey, in order for us to sustain, in order for us to stay competitive, this is the one that I probably need to chop off of, or do a migration to a newer tools, newer way of doing it. um, we have seen that with many HRIS system, right? Human resources system that are out there, that you have legacy systems that they have. You started off with spreadsheets, then you have ADPs, and then some of the providers of the world of doing that. Then you have this new companies who are coming about and automating the entire process of onboarding, offboarding, whatever the case may be, makes it much more easier. So it's very easy to see the difference between the two. And as a leader, it's easy for us to make those type of decisions versus something that has worked. It's something that is to the core, and you try to integrate few things into the core, and to do that. So I think, in order for us to stay competitive, in order for us to stay with the changes in the environment, you have to evolve. You have to do that, and those decisions are being made on a day-to-day basis, regularly, and saying, hey, is this the product or services that's working out for you? Similarly, is this the vendor or the partner that you're working with are able to meet your needs, or are you looking to consolidate, or are you trying to change that partner out? So those type of decisions making are occurring on a day-to-day basis, in my opinion. And yes, you need to continue to need to evolve. So it's a strategy that, again, if we can work with your current providers, if we can integrate into it, great. If it doesn't, then it's time to move on and get something that is new.
Yeah, I mean,
Anyways,
I think it'll be incredible to see which ones do
yeah,
have an updated product roadmap to stay relevant, to address the considerations that their customers have, and which ones don't do that because they're
yeah,
resting on their laurels. They feel like, well, and the customers aren't going to change or churn. Because I think it will be important decisions, right? If the pain is large enough because it's too
yeah,
clunky to work with, it's too hard to integrate with. Maybe the
right,
choice is that you do bite the bullet and migrate off.
yeah.
And then others that are maybe clunky today but have a good product roadmap to update the experience and get easier to work with do then end up still winning, right? And so I think I think the choice is up to the incumbents because they have distribution, they are installed in many organizations. It's
Right.
now up to them to get this inflection point right. So it'll be really interesting to see sort of how that plays out over the next couple of years. Maybe one final question on this.
Sure.
And obviously, IT and you in particular sit at the tip of the spear when it comes to new technology and the value it's creating and how it's going to change processes and affect the business. But what advice do you have for the people that are, maybe closer to the business side, the loan officers, the people that handle the account opening, the compliance analysts, the retail bankers?
Yeah.
How should they look at some of the technology that's coming online in order to remain highly relevant in their roles and be of really great value to the organizations that they work for?
Absolutely. I mean, just like any IT folks, they also need to be keep abreast of all the changes that are happening technologically. More importantly, what changes are occurring on the clients that they are serving. That the relationship that they're building with that clients. I'll use a loan officer for an example. If I'm a loan officer and I'm catering to, multi-model as one of my clients, what are your needs? How are you changing? How are your processing, the back-end processing are changing, right? and am I able to meet that need? So that if those individuals have that mindset and understand what the technological changes are required from the client perspective and stay abreast of all those changes, that's how they stay relevant to their work, as well as the needs of their client as well. So I think it's equally important for them to, we're living in a time where change is constant.
Yeah.
May that be technical change or any change. Change is inevitable, and if you're not, the classic book "Who Moved My Cheese," and if you're not with that, you're gonna be left behind. So we need to constantly improve on that, constantly learn about it, and I'll wrap it up with one sentence. This is anything that you do with technology, as far as the financial institutions, it has to be customer centric. What does your customer want, and are you delivering that want to your customers? And that's how you're going to stay abreast of all the changes and challenges, and you continue to thrive in this environment.
Incredible insight, Sachin. Really do appreciate that. I think you're absolutely right. I think the people that are in these roles, that are on the business side, they're not just passive players. They're not just passengers in this journey. They have a choice to make. Do they take advantage of the fact that this technology allows them to deliver more value to the end customer? So it is an opportunity as well as a challenge, right? If they don't adopt and don't handle this inflection point well, it will be a tough time ahead. But if they do embrace it and find ways to experiment, just like the IT functions do, then this could be hugely enabling to them, their career, and the value that's created for the end customers. So I think those are incredible words of wisdom and insight that I think both technical and non-technical viewers of our podcast could really benefit from. So
Absolutely.
I really do appreciate you spending time with us and being on the show, and really look forward to having you on in the next year or so and seeing how some of these things have been adopted within the organizations that you'll be a part of.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Ankur. It was a great conversation. Thanks for making it easy for me.
Of course, absolutely. Thanks, Sachin.